The empty chair and the lullaby. This happened a few months ago in our long-term care unit. We had Ms. Berger, a very sweet but profoundly demented lady. She'd sit all day in her wheelchair by the window, barely speaking, just a faint smile now and then. Her family rarely visited, and when they did, it felt distant. One evening, it was late and the unit was quiet, when Ms. Berger suddenly began to hum. Very softly, but it was a melody. I listened closely. It was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, a children's lullaby. I sat down beside her, and she kept humming, eyes half closed. Suddenly, she reached out her hand as if to grasp someone, and in her eyes was such a deep, childlike sadness. She then whispered very softly, "Mama, why are you leaving already?" My heart ached. I took her hand, and she leaned into me. She fell asleep like that, with that melody on her lips. The next morning, she didn't wake up. For me, it was as if in her last hours, she relived her childhood, that farewell to her mother. Sometimes, the quietest moments are the loudest.
The last laugh in room 7. Room 7 was our hospice room. Everyone who moved in new time was short. Mr. Schmidt, a man in his late 50s with an incurable illness, was our latest resident there. He was known for his dark humor, even in the face of death. Other nurses sometimes found him difficult, but I liked his honest, raw manner. One evening, I sat with him. He was in significant pain, but when I asked how he was, he gave a crooked grin. "Nurse, I've got a feeling I'm about to miss the biggest party of my life." I had to laugh, and so did he. Then he told me jokes, old ones, sometimes crude, but always with a twinkle in his eye. He gasped with laughter, even though it must have hurt. Then, mid-joke about a priest and a taxi driver, he fell silent. His laughter died into a sigh, and his eyes glazed over. I knew it was over. But his face wasn't contorted in pain, it still held the slight grin of his last joke. It was strange, sad, yet so incredibly fitting. He died laughing. I'll never forget that last, brave laugh in the face of death.
Mr. Klein's invisible library. Mr. Klein was a solitary man, one who surrounded himself with books, even though he couldn't read after a stroke. His room was crammed with them, stacked high on walls, on his nightstand. He barely spoke, only grunting when displeased. One day, an old, well-worn book fell from a stack. It was a novel I'd read myself. On a whim, I started reading aloud to him, just to create a peaceful atmosphere. To my surprise, his grunts quieted, and he turned his head slightly. When I stopped, he looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, there was a reaction, a flicker in his eyes. He lifted his hand and placed it on the page I'd just read. It was as if he understood every word, as if he were reliving the story. From that day on, I read to him every evening. He never spoke, but his reactions, a faint smile, a nod, sometimes a tear, spoke volumes. He passed away a few weeks later, as I read to him from that same book. It was as if the story I'd given him had echo.